All right, so now we're doing 10 black metal albums you might have missed in 2023. This isn't so much a challenge to see if you've missed these. This is more me collecting things that I wanted to review, things that surprised me, things that were underrated, and just generally just grabbing at things that are quality enough to talk about at the end of the year so that some overlooked stuff gets noticed. So we'll start with Tric Joys of Pierced Hearts from Lucifriction. This United States-based black metal duo is something that I picked up before and put down, and it wasn't that interested in at face value, because the first half was stronger than the second half, and the second half felt like a devolution beyond the first. And that's still my complaint behind it. But after having someone mention it to me and then having it recommended to me again, I went back and I gave it more of a chance. And sure, it's not a bad album. I think especially those first three songs are really where the power of the record is. And I think that's where they should focus going forward, because that is more sophisticated, better material. And by the time they get to the 15-minute song on this thing, I'm less interested. I know that makes them more dynamic and interesting, but for me, it was kind of a mixed bag overall. Still, it's a band you should probably know. 1943 is the latest full-length album from Leah. However you'd pronounce this band's name. This is a Norwegian black metal band, and one that was very well respected when they arrived back in about 2006. Some of the key members left to form Djevel. If you know Djevel, you'll understand that as very much a back to basics, straightforward Norwegian black metal band, and that's basically what this has always been. Now that they've returned, their sound is maybe a little bit more punkish. It's a little bit more all over the place, but great riffs are great riffs, and that's kind of what this record brings. It's a very straightforward, cold, and I would say just impressive record overall. I'm glad that they came back. It's very different from their first record in most ways, but it generally makes sense that they brought this back and they sound like this. I don't really know what the theme of the record is. I could take a couple of guesses, but basically, this is sort of like a thing that should not be, I guess. It's sort of a CDR they passed out at a record show, and I'm not sure if they're going to eventually release this in any other capacity, but I was able to access it online, and I was impressed by it, and I'd wondered what happened to this band after so many years, and it turns out they still had a record in them, and it was pretty good. One of my more enthusiastic recommendations on this black metal list is actually a black death metal record from a band that is blurs the line between sort of orthodox black metal, cult black metal, and death metal, sort of the way that Spartadowdy does and Aosoth does, and they've got members from Balmog in here too. So the Scalesian trio have just improved with every release since. This is their second full-length album, and it is an immersive occult black metal record. It's about as easy as I could put it. If you're familiar with Black Seed's roster and their output, this is a strong result and to be expected. This is a very immersive record, and I probably needed to spend more time with it. I just sat with it a few times before starting to write about it, and I realized, yeah, I need another, like a month with this record to really give it its due. So consider this a first impression and a strong one. So there you go. So the Helvetic Underground Committee put out a couple of records at the end of November by way of Eisenwald, and they were all great. This is actually a very impressive record that I just didn't spend any time with before they sent it in, because I only had about 6 days with it before it came out, and I chose to focus on a different record from the same kind of group of people. And this one turned out to be even better, or equally as good. Tempel's Clang, however you pronounce that, is a Gnostic focused or pre-Christian spiritual focused hymnal form of black metal and atmospheric black metal, which is what these folks from Zurich, Switzerland, tend to do best. And overall, I was comparing this to like Midnight Odyssey and Aeternus because of the dramatism that it sparks up and these very involved and long pieces. So, huge fan of this. Again, this is a record I needed more time with, so I thought I'd recommend it now and spend more time with it in the meantime because it is substantial and it's a very good record. I think it's been overlooked in general in the last several weeks. Bill Forel's is the debut album from Sin, and this is a band which they've been named as anonymous, but you should know this vocalist and recognize him right away, simply because V-Mode was a very well-known band back in 10 years ago, but they've recently, I think, signed to Prophecy Productions. I'm not sure which label it is, but they're putting out a record pretty soon, and the vocalist is very recognizable in his style, and this harkens back to that time about 10 years ago, but it also references Over and Forgotten Woods in its sort of statement there from the label as a kind of classic romanticist atmospheric black metal, and a pretty solid result overall. It's a very unique vocalist and a melodramatic style which is aggressive but overstated at the same time. Check it out and see what you think. Austrian melodic black metal band Asore have returned with a new full-length album and probably their longest record to date in Pyogenesis. This is a pretty substantial record, which is has a little bit of a kind of a gothic metal or dark metal touch to some parts, and most pieces are very slow to start. They're very slow to rise and have a small bit of a payoff. So it's a modern and atmospheric black metal record in that sense, but it is also a melodic black metal record otherwise. And so with enough patience, this does develop into an interesting enough record. I wouldn't say this is a glowing recommendation so much as the kind of thing where if you have the time and you want to give this record some patience because it seems compelling, I think it kind of paid off in that respect when I picked it up and kind of gave it a good hour to show what it could do, and it was fairly substantial. Oculus is an orthodox or occult black metal band from Serbian musician Kozeljenik, who is best known for pagan black metal band The Stone, and he's got members of Avenger and Maniac Butcher, who are now in Bohemist, also playing on this record. And so the big draw here is probably the lead guitarist Nero's performances. This is a stronger album than the first was. It's a more energetic and I would say aggressive record overall, but it does do away with some of the death metal influences and incorporates maybe more keyboards and dissonant pieces to sort of flesh it out in a different direction. So if you're ever wondering what happened to this band, they did have a follow-up 6 years later, and this is kind of the result. I think it was very overlooked, I think, because it was this isn't a thing that as many people are looking for these days, but it's still a substantial record. Blanc is the latest full-length album, or the debut full-length album from Perol. I think Go to Warx picked this up You might recognize this band, or some members of this band, from Asore, who are on Sepulchral Productions, but generally these are Quebec folks who are playing a form of black metal, which is actually pretty interesting. It's modern and melodic in some sense, but it is lo-fi and post-punk influenced otherwise. So it's a melancholic, kind of sorrowful form of atmospheric black metal, and one that kind of caught my ear the way a lot of these sort of punk-infused black metal of the last few years has. And overall, kind of the depressive style of it is pretty cool, and it's not fake and over the top, feeling like a lot of stuff is in this style. So easy recommendation for me, and something that a lot of people missed in the early part of the year. So Forgotten Sanctuary is the debut full-length album from Silva. This is a Minneapolis, Minnesota-based melodic black death metal band. And I think this was a hard one to place because it is certainly leaning in the melodic death metal side of things, but it does have black metal influences. And I think that they do well enough to avoid anything too typical here, while feeling like there are very clear influences from late 90s Swedish melodic black death metal. And of course, I mentioned melodic death metal bands to prove that point, such as kind of the 97-98 era of Hypocrite and Fatal Embrace, where we got maybe a drum machine on one of those records. It was a lot of bands trying to find a new direction after melodic death metal was kind of going nowhere in the late 90s. For some, it was a very crowded scene, and so this feels like it fits right in there, and not in the same way that Majesties does, even though I think Carl Skildum plays on at least one of the songs here. But it fits kind of in that realm pretty well, and I think in some ways this is a pretty authentic feeling record, especially if you're a fan of Dawn. And of course, most people know by now that that's one of my favorite bands in this style, so definitely worth checking out. Maybe I should have recommended this to death metal fans, but I think if you're a fan of melodic black death metal and you know how rare it is to find something even halfway decent, this is a good choice to make. Midnight Spawn Ved Djævelens Port is the second full-length album from Gista, Zika, a Danish pagan black metal band, kind of along the line of earlier Helheim or In the Woods. And this is a band that really caught my ear with their first record, but it was kind of a reissue that was a year later, and now getting a hold of this record right as it releases means that I can talk about it, and I think it's just kind of a great effort. It's very intensely melodic. It is woodsy as you would want, but not meandering, and the long form pieces are immersive in a way that I really appreciated.